everybody, to another episode of NAPO's podcast, Standout. I'm productivity catalyst Claire Kumar and thrilled to be your host. I'm excited today to dive into a topic that some of us want to talk about, some of us not so much. One of the top 6 leadership skills, according to a 2013 Harvard Business Review article, is the ability to anticipate. Well, very few anticipated the events of 2020. We know challenges will keep coming. In financial markets, there's an average of a 10% drop every 23 months. And we've all heard of the 7-year itch. With climate change, we've seen increasingly dramatic weather events. And as we know, life happens. So, and even when we know things we know will happen, we are often unprepared. Take, for example, Aretha Franklin and Prince, who both died without leaving a will. As organizers and productivity professionals, we are uniquely positioned to help our clients prepare for inevitable challenges. But how can we best go about it? And what are some of the key challenges? So today, to better understand that, and how to help clients prepare for the unexpected, NAPO member and professional organizer Lisa Witzleben is here with us. Why Lisa? Well, Lisa spent over 13 years working in logistics and worked alongside the State of Alaska Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management as a logistics planner. She holds a Master's of Science in Global Supply Chain Management. She became a solopreneur in 2015, running Unclutter Me to assist clients in leading a simpler life through an intentional process of uncluttering, then organizing. She's the proud wife and mom of 3, and she's joining us today from Meridian, Idaho. Welcome to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Claire. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm thrilled to pick up from an episode that you did for us in, I think, September, in the fall of 2019. And it was all around disaster preparedness, but really focusing on natural disasters. And we know there's a lot of other kinds of events to prepare for. So I wanted to have a conversation today, sort of twofold. Number one, about how we can help our clients prepare for the known and the unknown, that sort of the psychological challenges that we're having. And then two, to get into what can we do to help ourselves, because there's a lot that we might be missing in terms of how we're looking after our businesses as well. And we need to perhaps dive into some of this thinking on our own.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a very key point, is people need to realize that we have ability to take control of situations, be it known or unknown.
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you an example of a story. And I know you are from Alaska and spent most of your life there. And so this story just hit the news recently, partly because there's a bit of Canada involved here. There's a young woman who decided to make a trip from Georgia to North Pole, Alaska. So there's a city called North Pole, Alaska, which I thought was so charming. And because her husband's in the military and stationed there. So she knew she wanted to get there early before the winter hit and so on, and delays happened. But by her own admission, she was very unprepared. She was driving for about 5 days in whiteout conditions without snow tires on her truck, with a U-Haul attached behind, and precious cargo inside, her 2 kids, her dogs, and her cat, not in the U-Haul, in the truck. So this lack of preparedness for a known trip, but a lot of unknowns, obviously, in her world. And it became a real challenge for her, so much that through social media, she ended up connecting with a lovely, I think also a former military gentleman who heard the challenge, knew someone was in distress, and drove her, I think, 1,400 kilometers to get from British Columbia all the way to Anchorage. So a massive story of generosity and sort of finding, a solution arriving. But this is a great example of what happens, what stops people from preparing for known risks. And then we can get into challenges we can't see. But what about known risks? Like, we know we're making this trip. What happens in people's minds?
Great question. The biggest thing that keeps anyone away from doing this is almost exactly why we as professional organizers, productivity specialists, and CPOs are working, is that the number one reason our clients end up calling us is because they are finally just so overwhelmed. The
Mm.
number one reason that folks will not prepare even for the known is fear. And
Hmm.
they feel as if they're taking it pessimistically versus realistically. And I am a very big believer, especially with a lot of my education that I've had, of that there is a very fine difference between thinking pessimistically and thinking realistically. And a lot of folks, no matter what country that they're from, don't want to look at that because it builds anxiety, it
Mm.
builds stress, it builds a feeling of uncomfortable that they have in them, and they feel as if almost that we've seen from various self-help books of, if I think of the negative, I may produce the negative, so I don't want to even do it. So I'm going to put that in a jar, I'm going to put that in a cupboard and not worry about it,
Mm.
and know that, like in the case of your example, uh, going on a trip and thinking that they have it all under control and not researching, not looking at the fact that you're going to go through another country, and that
Mm.
you're hitting a terrain that is nothing like Fort Benning, Georgia, moving to J Bear, up in North Pole, Alaska.
Mm.
And that is what a lot of people are fearful of, be it that it is something as small as a broken bone that may keep you down for a while, or as big as what we're all experiencing now, no matter where you're from, this global pandemic, is there are things that we can control. And
Mhm.
what we can control is preparing. And what we need to do with our clients is let them know that we're there to help them through this. But the biggest reason they will not attack these issues is fear.
Yeah. It reminded me or made me think of illness too. So oftentimes you can get a diagnosis and it's like, oh, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. It's like we want to gloss over the reality, and it's our own fear. And it's maybe to your point, the belief that if we actually dance in that space, what you think about materializes. I love the clarity of thinking there. So and I like how you position that organizers and productivity experts can be support for clients. Um, I just wanted to just talk on about the denial piece a little bit, because with challenges that we can't see, and obviously the COVID-19 and the pandemic being one of them, it's not visible until it's the symptoms are there and it's happening to you. It's not visible. It's not like murder hornets. I always said if COVID looked like murder hornets, we'd all be behaving a lot differently, right? I was reading an article on health.com about why people might not be choosing to wear masks, for example, even though the health guidelines have been clarified. And this is the quote. It says, denial leads to avoidance and then leads to not hearing the facts, which in turn leads to not following safe measures to prevent the thing they fear. It is a vicious, unhelpful cycle which ultimately contributes to the problem. So you're right. You mentioned the word fear, and that's where it starts. But what they're talking about there is it sort of spirals. And so then people are not even listening anymore. So there's a complete shutdown. So what can we do to become part of this conversation then as business owners that actually can help with the overwhelm? If people have moved to a denial position, I'm actually going to beat this disease, I'm going to be fine, I don't need treatment, I don't, how do we insert ourselves into these conversations?
Well, great question. I think the first thing to look at is when we see any of these situations, and in fact, the most common reason we're brought into people's lives is because it has overwhelmed them. And
Mhm.
as we know, clutter, be it that you work in the corporate field or in the residential field, or you're working on productivity of that time, is clutter affects us mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and physically.
Yeah.
And when these unknowns happen, and we know about the knowns of that we need to have plans in place for potential illnesses, long-term care outside of even COVID-19. I mean, we know there's an inevitable for all of us coming at some point in time. But then when you put in those factors of unknown, is that what we need to do, how we can interject ourselves with our clients, is that bringing this up that we are there to help and work along with them. We can hold their hand and help them develop their go folder. We can help them create
Yeah.
their memory totes. We are there to
Mhm.
help them through this, because if we can take away some of the logistics, then they will be able to focus on what they need to focus on, which is the fact that you have no control over the emotional, you have no control over what you may be experiencing spiritually, for whatever the case may be, as small or as large. And if we have some of these things in place and we talk our clients through this, then they'll be able to grieve or handle or work through whatever that unknown is far better. And they
Mm.
probably will come out far better on the other side of whatever that particular unknown is. And we are the perfect catalyst to start this conversation with our clients.
I love it. So what the opportunity is to suggest the conversation, right? In our marketing and our efforts, in our reach out efforts with clients,
Yeah.
existing clients, for example, our clients that we already have relationship with. Some of our blog posts could be all about this opportunity to be of support and maybe give an idea of what it could look like. Yeah, because a lot of people might be just putting it off because it's a difficult thing and they don't know what to do. So planting some
Well,
seeds
and
around that.
the other big thing, Claire, is the aspect that who wants to talk about this? Who wants to, on a Tuesday afternoon, who wants to work on their plans for if they weren't able to stay in their home for something that may happen to their home? As silly as
Mhm.
let's say that there was a pipe burst, or let's say it is a global pandemic or a natural disaster or a health occurrences. No one wants to take a Tuesday afternoon and work through things that are not fun at all and different from organizing where you see a clear end result. You see that
Mm.
clear payment. You see that record retention program in a corporate world that looks beautiful. You've spent all this time on something for what? A lot of people say, I may not ever need that. And the
Yeah.
answer to that is true. We may not ever need
Yeah.
that. But the likelihood is within our life, at some point, you will need that. And so let's put those in
Yeah.
places so you can handle that particular situation the best you can emotionally.
Well, it's a bit of an extension of buying a life insurance policy or with your, at least with our homes, we're pretty much mandated if we're purchasing a home to have bought insurance on it. So maybe there's some parallel that can be made with, hey, these are some things nobody's mandating it, but it ought to be there to make you feel safe and then liberate you to expend your energy in things that only you can do. So
Well,
yeah.
I got it interesting when I did the podcast that we did prior is organizers actually had their clients listen to the podcast and then they started to have conversations. What we're doing, Claire, is
Mm.
we're utilizing our own skills and techniques that we have really honed ourselves into, and we're talking about the elephant in the room and saying outside of organizing the things
Mm.
or the digital aspect, that we're saying we're preparing for something, and having someone that's a third party who's not connected to us, as we talk about in organizing, we're not relationally in most cases tied to these individuals. So we
Right.
have that barrier of where we can look at things differently than they are, and we might be able to help solve some of these issues of what's holding that barrier up for them to attack these, and we are the
Yeah.
perfect individuals to start that for them.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of how you might begin that conversation, or how, like, what have you done within your business or through your marketing materials or through direct conversation? Can you give me an example of, okay, you're gonna reach out to someone. What does that look like?
In a lot of cases, they have called me because of a particular unknown that took place,
Hmm.
or we've had an unknown. It could be a natural disaster. And what I will do is I have recommended 7 things that we should start with our clients, that we can obviously reference here within this podcast. But I will start with them saying, do you have, I'll bring up one of the 7 things.
Hmm.
Have you started to establish a go folder? And some of them might, then that opens the door. What is a
They're,
go
first
folder?
of all, they're going to say, "What's a Go folder?"
And then
Right.
we sit down and have that. I never bring up everything. I never say, you should have, kind of like what you see off of infomercials, or, here's the whole kit and caboodle of everything you need to prepare for. Even, for
Mm-hmm.
instance, I reference these sites all the time, the local, state, and federal websites, but they're all daunting and overwhelming of you need to be doing all of this.
Mm.
Start with it just piece by piece. I will start by saying, do you have cash on hand? Where are you keeping that
But
cash? And
before
you
we
might.
get there, I want to go back to before we get there. So
Mhm.
in so far, what you've done is respond to people who have reached out to you for help. have you ever gone the other way and just sort of you're reaching out to say, I'm just checking in with my clients. I'm just checking in to see how you're all doing. Have you had that conversation, and how would you, maybe you haven't done this, and I'm totally
No,
putting you on the
actually,
spot here, but that's what I was sort of looking for, because I thought it might help our listeners go, oh, I could say it that way. That feels, that's a good language for me to practice.
I actually, the majority of how I've started it is with current clients
Mhm.
who then this comes up. So I've been hired to work with them. I haven't brought it up right away, nor have they brought it up to me, but we've worked through various things. And then I'll say, you know what? Are you prepared for something unknown? Be it, and I'll use an example, a broken ankle or all the way up. Do you feel that you are prepared as a family, or you individually, or you as a business? Do you think you could
Mhm.
handle whatever may come? And almost immediately, huge sigh. And the answer is no, I'm not prepared, but I can't even imagine attacking that. And then that's when I insert myself and say, I can help you. I can help you get ready for this. And we're just going to take it step by step. So depending on the client, Claire, this is what's important, is that where you may start with one client might be totally different than another. So for instance, I've done with some clients where I'll say, let's talk about, one of the reasons I bring up the cash is I will start that conversation. I mean, I just throw it out there, elephant in the room. Are you working on a unknown preparedness plan? Are you setting yourselves up for whatever that may be? Doesn't have to be natural disaster. Their
Right.
answer immediately is no with a sigh. And then I say, we're going to do this together. And a lot of times they will immediately take a breath of fresh air and say, it just seems so daunting. And I just
Mhm.
can't even physically wrap myself around doing it. And that's when we say, I'm here to help you. Now,
Yeah, because they've probably been beating themselves up, feeling called out that it's not ready, right?
and
Yeah.
so that's where you can look at various facets of where you start. Do you want to look at starting with a go folder? Maybe it's as simple as setting up their social media so they know they can reach out to loved ones. Is it working on your point of contacts of who you would call? Do you have a safe in your cache? I don't just blurt all this out. I'll start with one of those points, and you're baby stepping them through it without telling them, by the way, we're going to hit this huge list of things. Uh,
Mm.
and it goes over very well. And a lot of times I'll have people come to me. Every one of my clients has come to me from a corporate or a residential and say, I know I'm only a third of the way there, or I know we've just started, but I already feel more control in the fact that I'm tackling this elephant that's in the room. And
Mhm.
you're helping them, number one, acknowledge the elephant. And number two, we're creating a plan together. That plan
Mhm.
may be different from one client to another. It's still the
Mhm.
same ball, but we might be morphing it a little different for each one. And
Mhm.
then number three, we're acting on the plan and we're helping them with that and letting them know we don't have to look at so many people look at the 60,000 foot level. And we
Mhm.
need to come down and just look at the 1 foot level and say, all I'm working on right now is my goal folder. I'm not worried about uh, my memory totes, my electronics, my cash. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm just working on this and I'm going to get through this. And we're
Mhm.
there to keep them on task, consistent, and finish the plan out.
Is this ever a part of a conversation, when you're onboarding a new client and they've asked you for specific help on something that's gone really well, and as part of a, what other things might we be able to help you with? And the reason I'm saying that is because the fear might not even be part of it. I'm thinking personally, I'm very, very pragmatic. I've had a will in place, but it's from a province that I moved from 14 years ago. So it's
Right.
time to redo that, but it's never been urgent. And
Right.
so, and I've always known it would be valid to some degree. It would be better to have one here. Hard to get a lawyer to tell me what, how, why, and how much better. I finally got that insight a week or so ago, and I've made it a priority to add a codicil to that now, and that feels better. And I have in the works to find a lawyer to draft to revise my will. Um, but it's interesting. So fear wasn't a part of that. There were just other more pressing things to do. So if we're looking at the little things you can do, how do you raise this urgency about doing something while also creating that sense of safety in the process as well?
I don't beat around the bush, to be honest. I'm very direct. I will say to my clients, we're working on we might be in the midst of the project and I might be bringing it up in the middle of it or towards the end. That varies on the client, but I'll just say, how are you and your family, if it's just an individual or a business, how do you feel you would rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in preparedness for any unknown? And usually they'll laugh, in a nervous laugh, or say, I normally don't get a we're 10 or even in the 7 to 10 category. And
That's a
then
tough
also,
question. That question is overwhelming. If I heard that question, I'd be like, what do you mean by unknown? I feel like, and as a planner, I try and plan for things. So that would, what I was thinking there might be an opportunity, and tell me how this sits with you, is say, for example, you've been asked to help somebody with their paperwork
yeah,
and you come across, documents and you realize there's gaps there.
yeah.
And where is the will? Where is the power of, you notice a power of attorney or a living will is missing. Is that an opportunity to say, oh, I know we're staying on this task now, but let's talk about this. Let's reserve a few minutes at the end of the session to talk about this.
Usually I use the opportunity right then and there. And you have those opportunities where sometimes it's not so just out of the blue direct, especially if you are working on paperwork, to where you can say, let's table this, put it over here, but we're going to put it on our to-do list. I've never had anyone not just completely back away from it, because it's almost a relief that there's someone else along
Hmm.
with them that they look at that could help them through it. Because as you know, looking at the situation of the example of the wills, is
Mhm.
that's a lot of family issues that they have to work through, of who, what, why, and having someone who is not related to you helping you with that. Now, of course, I always advocate finding the correct legal sources and things of that nature, but us even having those conversations of, do you have a will? What
Mhm.
is our steps to get that taken care of? But I think that there's a lot of other things that, when I explain the unknown, and that's where I think a lot of people go to an unknown and they think really negative. They
Mhm.
think that it has to be a global pandemic or it has to be a massive hurricane or tornado. It could be as simple as a child getting a broken ankle, or you, if you're the head of household, you get a broken ankle. And are you prepared for life to still continue? You're not completely housed up and not able to do everything, but this is a significant setback. And are you prepared to know that we don't know what our unknowns are, but we could have control in getting things lined up to where we have things ready to go so that life can continue and not completely get out of control?
So tell me, do you have a list of unknowns that you should have plans for?
I always say that I never make them specific. I always say that we need to be prepared for minor health care
Okay.
issues, which when I say minor is like a broken something, a
Yeah.
broken arm, a broken shoulder, a broken leg, to where you're immobile, but not for a
Yeah.
very long period of time. But it
And
affects you,
temporary.
especially,
Mhm.
yes, especially if you are, the mom, dad, the caretaker of whomever, or maybe it's just yourself, but you have to continue to care for your animals and things of that nature. So my
Yeah.
unknowns I describe are small medical, to
Mhm.
where you're temporary not able to work at your quote unquote 100%.
Yeah.
We then need to look at your major medical of,
Yeah.
goodness gracious, let's say it is a stroke, or we find out we have a very big illness that's going to require an extensive amount of care and medication.
Mm.
I think of like various cancers, that where you would need to get chemotherapy, and your energy level and everything would
Mm.
completely be diminished.
Mhm.
Then we need to look at natural disasters. And that's a big area that a lot of people, they immediately think that's what I'm thinking of all the time, and it's not. But we do need to be
Okay.
prepared that anything could happen beyond the fact of flood, fire, earthquake, tornado, hurricane, and that's going to be different for every area.
Mm.
So it's not
100%.
specific to, you go to a lot of these things, it's specific to hurricane or it's
Right.
specific to extreme heat. And we're saying we're preparing for whatever is a natural disaster within your area. And
Right.
even if it happens once every few years or hundreds of years or 20 years, you're
Yeah.
prepared.
Yeah, like it was
Another,
really great when the ice storm hit in Toronto that we had a working
mm,
fireplace.
yes,
Like it didn't happen a lot. Or a generator. Generator sales go up after these events, but is
that's
it something
exactly,
is it something you
that's
can plan
exactly
for?
it's
Mhm.
afterwards. They
Mhm.
experience the unknown because they weren't prepared. They go and buy it all. They never educate themselves or set any of that up, thinking, well, at least I bought it. And then they end up in the situation 5, 6 years, 3 months from now, and they're still back to square one. Another example of an unknown is looking at a global pandemic. So it
Mm-hmm.
can be, and you also have to look at your home, where you live, or in your workspace. For those productivity specialists and organizers that work in the corporate, is what if something happened to the office? What if they ended up having to where, if they didn't have a full backup system for their record retention,
Mm-hmm.
is what is it that they're prepared for? And are they ready for that? And so
What kind
these
of
are examples.
redundancies are built in, and yeah, communication, all of that. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
your unknown, people need to step away from the aspect of just thinking of something horrid or a pipe burst, be it in your residence or in your business. A pipe burst, we're not able to be there. What now?
Yeah.
And what are the steps that we have in place? And that's where I'm saying, no matter what the unknown is, put it
Mm-hmm.
as X, we can get ourselves set up somewhat in advance to where we could then handle the unknown that we have no control over far better, because
Right.
we have all these various steps put in place.
I love it. Um, gosh, it sounds like we're providing different kinds of support. So, number one, emotional support to face the fear. Number two, perhaps practical recommendations on the scope of things to think about.
Yes.
And then number three, it sounds like even just accountability could be useful for, you know what, I know I need to get my will done. Okay, I'm going to be back to you, my trusted professional organizer. 2 weeks, if I haven't phoned and found a lawyer, I want you to ask me about that again.
Yes.
Right? Yeah.
That's a huge part of it. Is I have found, even with my clients not even discussing this, it's the accountability, is that
Yeah.
we're coming in and setting these things up. We're saying, let's make your point of contact list. And a lot of times what they need to do is just talk that out. And so we're working along with them, and then they have to make those phone calls and such. I have found such big success with clients and those of my colleagues who have started to work with their clients, of they seeing such great success of us just taking this opportunity, one, to work with your clients in a totally different aspect, but you have the skills to do so,
Mm.
to help your client move into an area that prepares them. And the clients themselves are saying just how a breath of fresh air they have, and to talk about they've gone from fear to now relief.
Mm. And there's some momentum, like you said. There's some positive energy and momentum, and that common control that feels like it feels good from having done something. So
Right.
I love all of that conversation. What I'm curious about now is maybe before we get into what we can do in our own businesses, and so how do we, put a spotlight on what we might need to be looking at right now. Um, is there Where did my question go? I'm thinking about the kinds of things we would talk to clients about. If we have an existing client base, for example, mine your client base for people who would be in this geographic area potentially experiencing
Mhm.
this specific thing. Mine your talents for where you have particular skill in certain area that could be supportive of this kind of thing. So doing a little bit of an audit of your client and your skills potentially to figure out where some opportunities might be to go for.
And that's number one, is that you have to, outside of presenting the elephant in the room, you also have to realize, is your client emotionally and mentally ready to handle this conversation? The
Mm,
majority, I would have to say, to a degree, are. There are some that we all probably, and any of us listening to this right now might say, nope, that client's not ready. That doesn't mean we don't necessarily bring it up later. Where I always recommend, if you needed a starting point, would be to start talking about that go folder. And in that go folder are, like, for instance, the specific details of your home, be it that
Can I
that's your
just stop you
insurance.
there? Just so if someone hasn't heard the term Go Folder before,
Mhm.
we're probably launching this episode, I think, in Go Month, which is
Yeah,
Get Organized Month, which is an event that
right.
NAPO has created. What do you mean by Goal Folder exactly? And then sorry, we can proceed with where
Yeah.
where you were taking us.
So I recommend that people start talking with your clients on a go folder. So what is a go folder? A go folder is a folder of all of your important information that you may need to put your hands on immediately, that lives in your safe, lives in your secure area. I like to say safe because I want it to be waterproof, secure,
Fire
free of
resistant.
anything of that nature.
Yeah.
And so it lives in there, and it literally is a file that's meant to go with you. There isn't an acronym. It doesn't it's not, it's literally just GO, goes
Okay.
with you.
Okay.
And what's in that is the fact that may be your mortgage. It may be your insurance, your mortgage. Now, is it the actual document, your formal document? It's a copy. We're not taking the originals of anything, because I would like those kept in, it might be kept in that same safe, but this is stuff you're taking with you, and we don't want to know you're losing originals when you're out there, if you have to leave that area. Now, you may not actually have to leave your home. Keep that in mind. That's where people take this unknown way too big. Is it might be the medical situation where you need to get into that folder for whatever reason. So this includes your will. It includes anything in estate planning. It includes your contacts that you may need to be in contact with.
Isn't this mostly just in my phone now? Or is it like we're going to talk about digital versus the physical thing?
So the reason I highly recommend that we also have a physical versus a digital is because one of the areas I talk about with unknowns is, for whatever reason, be it that battery life is gone and you don't have access to your phone for whatever the situation, or more importantly, like for instance, you're talking about that ice storm, you don't have internet capability. Well, if everything is kept in that phone and you don't know anything, then you don't have it. So I'm a firm believer when it comes to the critical data that we have. I firmly agree that we should have a digital backup, but I also believe that we should have some physical, because there is a point where digital just may not be available to us.
I know I have been in my car charging my phone before, because running the battery in the car and then driving the phone because the power went out. This is a summer storm situation. So yeah, you raise a good point. It's understanding what you need to have, what might you need to have at your fingertips. A passport, for example, that would go in there, right?
Yes.
Prescriptions, things like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's a not such an emotionally charged thing to actually start working on,
Correct.
right?
And
Yeah.
what's nice about that is that's where they usually need the help, is the checklists, which I
Mhm.
have a lot of this myself on my own website. But then if you were to use any of your local, state, or federal or territorial
Mm.
websites, they
Yep.
have this kind of stuff
Yeah.
available. I think that this is far more important than having your food source, than having the blankets. This is the information you may need to get to ASAP. And again, you may not have that mobile connectivity to have it. And each
Right.
person's going to be different. Someone may say, okay, I don't need to even worry about the mortgage or the insurance for the home because that doesn't apply to me. And that's
Right.
okay. But we
Right.
do have medications,
Yeah.
and we all have animals. Maybe you
Yeah.
have animal medications we need to do.
Yeah.
And then we need to look at our wills and our HIPAA and things of that nature that
What's a HIPAA? What?
HIPAA is that for the medical form of saying that you have
Okay.
the release to give your information to others, and or they have the information to give it to you.
This is because I'm
And so these are
Canadian, so
things.
I don't understand some of the U.S. acronyms. I'm like, say, what's a HIPAA? Sounds fun to me, but I don't I don't know
No,
what
it's
it.
not fun. It's not
Okay.
fun.
Okay. Thank
It's
you.
it's necessary, but not fun. But these are the
Yeah.
things that I recommend starting, and it's daunting. And that's where the go folder, again, no acronym, just means I
Mm.
need to go, be it to a hospital, leave my home,
Mm.
or leave my office. I need
Mm.
to go. I know I'm taking the most critical data I need, and it is in a copy form. I want to
Mhm.
reiterate, it's not the original,
Yeah.
even though you have the digital that you plan to use as your first primary. This is your backup, and you can take that deep breath of, I've got it. And where the
Yeah.
organizer steps in is, that's arduous to come up with that. That's very
Mhm.
arduous to get all this together, and they don't want to do it. They, the client, don't want to do it. And we're going to nudge them along, give them that accountability to finish that
Mhm.
product.
Love it. Can we turn our attention now to our businesses? We've been talking about helping clients, but what are we failing to look at in terms of unknowns that we should be making plans for? What can you talk to us about there?
That's a great question. So, when we look at our businesses, be it that you're a solopreneur or if you have many, many employees that work underneath you, a lot of businesses are familiar with the term, but the term is called COOP. COOP, which means continuity of
Mm,
operations plan.
mm-hmm.
And a lot of businesses do have this, but very interesting, a lot of small businesses do not. Solopreneurs, um,
Yeah.
and all just
Yeah.
small businesses themselves do not. We're seeing that happen more and more to where they are developing a plan. And what a continuity of operations plan is how do I continue my business but leave my location either physically or I have to work digitally, as many of us are having to do.
Yeah.
Where our businesses are failing, again, solopreneur or many employees underneath you, is we need to have the conversation with our employees or
Mm,
perhaps even our vendors. This is critical of maybe your website developer,
yeah.
maybe the person who develops your newsletters, is have that conversation, be willing to throw that out to them of, are you prepared? Are you prepared personally? So when things change, let's
Mhm.
talk about employees that they might be able to continue to report in whatever the unknown is. And again, it might be an unknown that's just specific to them. They
Yeah.
have a family member that's been hurt or they're experiencing health issue.
Right.
When you're talking to your vendors, it's allowing them to go, I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't thought about my own self or
Right.
how me being ill prepared is going to hurt my clients. And you're
Right.
starting to have this conversation. So not necessarily worrying about your coup plan for your business, but are your employees, are your vendors ready? So that way we can continue this cycle of connectivity and hopefully see businesses thrive or at least maintain or manage through whatever the unknown is, be it that it's specific to that business or it's like what we're all experiencing now, a global
Right.
pandemic.
Right. So it's about asking some questions to
Yes.
make sure that you can continue, and then responding and figuring out what you might need to have in place as backups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a
Yeah.
lot of businesses, I will say, they work on their own plan, but they haven't thought about their employees or they haven't thought about their
Yeah.
vendors. So I push and I strongly suggest that you start to have these conversations
Yeah.
because that will allow your business so you can work with your clients and continue to see growth
Yeah.
if they're prepared and you
So
start to have.
given that we're still in the pandemic and we will be in restrictions for some while, and sensitivities to the virus being so dangerous for a lot of us, what conversation, for example, and we'll finish this with this question: what conversation could you have with an employee? What would that look like? So you're not perceived as being too invasive, but you're asking to, like, how do you guide the conversation successfully?
That's a great question. I think the first thing you do is, especially let's talk about employees, is that with employees, which is where the first conversation should be before we're worrying about vendors, is to present the unknown. I mean, from even what you may have learned from this podcast is that unknowns can be small, they don't have to be large. And having that just open-ended question of, do you feel yourself that you're prepared for an unknown, be it a small medical situation that may happen in your family to a large something that may deter you from being able to actively participate as a team member? And
Mm,
having that conversation, just presenting that one question, we'll start to have them think through this. And then that's where you can present the ideas of, well, let's start to, if you would like any help, if I can guide you in any way,
mm,
shape, or form, I'd be happy to do so. And how we can work on getting yourself to where you feel that you can leave your family for whatever reason or continue to come to work because of the medical situation. A very interesting fact happened was when I worked for Homeland Security Emergency Management, we did a test. It was just meant to do a test to see how the businesses would react. And so what we did was we acted as if our telecommunication lines had all been cut from Alaska and we had no telecommunications at all. And we involved all of the private partnerships, the very large ones, financial, healthcare, oil and gas, communications. And we had them all participate in this exercise. And what our number one thing we came to find out was that the businesses came back and told us that they would not have succeeded because their employees were not set up to handle and come to work for said specific exercise. So it really comes down to, as we say, looking instead of the 60,000 foot level, that 1 foot level
mm,
of, they realized that even though they had these great plans, the business may not have been able to handle it successfully because the employees themselves, the vendors themselves, were not set up or had set themselves up to handle this particular exercise.
Wow, fascinating. As you can tell, I had done some disaster preparedness by not buying toxic plants, but I did not have a plan if my cat just knocked down the flowers. I don't know if you caught him. He was right behind me. I was like, what are you doing back there? Oh, thank you so much, because this is it feels a little heavy talking about it, because it's making me think of what else I haven't thought of. And so I think as we present this opportunity to control things you can control, and do some things so that if something goes wrong, you start to feel better. It may be even so helpful in dealing with how do you prepare, and living with masks, and the new routines coming in and out of the house, and with groceries. There's all kinds of places this can go. And I think having that support that you talk about, and the role we can play in being supportive service providers who are really aware, who are in our own turn adopting some of these things. So we better be walking the talk on some of this too, right? If we're going to be helping people with it, we better have our wills in place, our power of attorney. We better have thought about how we're going to show up on all of these different things. So it's an opportunity, I think, for our listeners. I invite you to think about what in your world that could use a little bit more. It's not urgent now, but it's important, and what could use some attention there. And then how can you turn this into an opportunity to serve others? So yeah, Lisa, that's wonderful insights. I appreciate very much you spending the time with us. Thanks so much for joining us from Meridian, Idaho. And I want to thank everyone again. This was another episode of Standout, your NAPO podcast. Stay tuned for another episode. And until then, be safe, take care of yourselves, and enjoy the journey. All right, as you know, on YouTube, I always like to ask one more question, and probably there's 10, but I'm going to pick one. And as someone who runs a service business and wants to be able to show up for my clients no matter what, I'm really curious about what questions can I be asking of my employees without being too invasive, to understand what they're capable of. Can you help us with a bit of a soundbite on what that could look like, Lisa?
Absolutely. I think the first thing to do is just to ask the open-ended question of whatever the unknown may be, are you prepared can you come into work? And a lot of times what you're going to find from these employees is that they'll start to do their train of thought and work through their own personal situation to see if they can. You need to be very careful though, because you are probing into personal information that they might say, I need time to think about that. I'm not sure. Whatever the case may be, and you need to be able to give them the grace that answer may not be immediate for you. It also may become very open-ended, where they start to work through it and realize that they may need some assistance so that they can be more of a team player and be available. Or you realize this is a great employee, but if an unknown happens, they may not be available. And you, as the business owner, realizing you could help them get to the point that they are available, or just know that they may not be available, will help you and yourself handle this unknown that may affect your business. But you do need to be very careful that we're not asking that they have to give us that answer right away. We're just somewhat enticing the aspect of, are you looking at the fact of, are you prepared for an unknown? And let them think about that. Let them toil on that and have that be an open discussion. That may be a couple of days. It might be an immediate conversation. And it might be something where we're able to guide them and will help us with our businesses. And also, more importantly, help your own employees to be able to handle these situations as well.
Thank you so much. I love that reframe. Thanks again, Lisa, for joining us.
Absolutely.